What you just saw were different responses or actions of a man in certain situations. Response is the activity of the body due to external or internal stimulus or a change in the environment. The response or actions that occur in your body can be of two types: voluntary and involuntary. Riding a bicycle, dancing, and eating an apple are some examples of voluntary or conscious actions, as they are initiated by free will. On the other hand, withdrawing your hand on getting pricked, shivering, and the dilation of the pupil are some examples of involuntary or reflex actions. These are very sudden and are initiated by some stimulus such as pain, pressure, heat, cold, light, or touch. Let's understand some other differences between a voluntary action and an involuntary or reflex action. Apart from the nature of the action, another important distinction is the organs that control these actions. For instance, voluntary action is controlled by the brain, whereas reflex action is controlled by the spinal cord. Also, all voluntary actions result in a muscular action, while reflex actions result in a muscular action or secretion from some gland. The mechanism of reflex action was discovered in 1833 by an English physician and physiologist, Marshall Hall. Reflex actions or reflexes are of two types, namely natural or inborn reflexes and conditioned or acquired reflexes. Natural reflexes are the ones that do not require a person to have previous experience or learning, and can either be protective or have some functional efficiency. Some protective natural reflexes are closing the eye quickly if an object suddenly approaches it, withdrawing the hand when pricked, coughing, and sneezing. On the other hand, natural reflexes that have functional efficiency are salivation, which helps in breaking down food, and peristalsis, or contraction and relaxation of the muscles in the small intestine, which helps in propelling food through the digestive tract. Other reflexes with functional efficiency include breathing and jerking of the knee. Let's now learn about conditioned reflexes that a person develops during their lifetime due to experience or learning. One example of conditioned reflex is salivation due to the smell or sight of familiar tasty food. In this case, the salivation occurs because the person has eaten similar food earlier. Since the brain remembers the taste of the food, it works unconsciously and the salivary glands get activated. Therefore, conditioned reflexes are actually acquired and not inborn. One famous experiment that proved the idea of conditioned response was carried out by the Russian biologist Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov conducted his experiment on a dog and observed its behavior closely. He noticed that under normal circumstances, when the dog was given food, it secreted saliva. However, when a bell was rung or some other sound was made, the dog did not salivate, as it was not conditioned to do so. This dog was then trained or conditioned over a period of time by ringing the bell when it was given food. After an adequate period of training, Pavlov noticed that the dog salivated at the sound of the bell even when it was not given any food. In other words, the dog exhibited a conditioned response. The stimulus or the sound of the bell previously had no relation with the dog's salivary response. However, after the conditioning, the sound of the bell elicited salivation in the dog. Most of our daily habits also fall in the category of conditioned reflexes. For example, applying the brakes on your vehicle when somebody suddenly comes in front, giving a hand signal while driving, playing a musical instrument, and knitting without looking at the wall. Reflex action is a very quick response of the body involving a sophisticated nervous pathway. Let's learn about the components involved in a reflex action. A reflex action starts with a receptor, which refers to the body organ such as the skin, eye, or ear. The receptor receives an external or internal stimulus and initiates a sensory impulse. The sensory or afferent nerve fiber then takes the sensory impulse generated by the receptor to the sensory neuron, which is located in the dorsal part of the gray matter of the spinal cord. The spinal cord and the brain form the central nervous system, where the sensory impulse generates an outgoing motor impulse. Between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron lies a connecting association or intermediate neuron. It receives the sensory impulse from the sensory neuron and sends it to the motor neuron. The motor neuron carries this impulse to the effector organ such as a muscle or a gland with the help of the efferent nerve fiber, which is located in the ventral part of the gray matter of the spinal cord. Finally, the motor impulse is received and responded to by the effector organ, which could be either a muscle or a gland. The complete route of a nervous impulse from a receptor to an effector is known as the reflex arc. It is the shortest route that an impulse can take. To understand the reflex action better, let's study one more example. A man touches the handle of a pan on a gas stove and realizes that it is hot, and immediately pulls his hand away. Here's the sequence of the events that form the reflex arc. The heat of the handle acts as a stimulus that stimulates the nerve endings present in the skin of the hand. In other words, the skin acts as the sensory receptor. On coming in contact with the hot handle, the sensory nerve fibers take the impulse generated by the skin to the sensory neuron located in the spinal cord. The intermediate neuron in the gray matter of the spinal cord coordinates and relays the sensory impulses to the motor neuron. Now, the motor neuron brings the order from the spinal cord to the effector organ, which is the muscle of the man's hand. This results in the muscle contracting, causing man to withdraw his hand as a response. This path that an impulse takes in a reflex action is known as the reflex arc. In this way, behind every voluntary and involuntary action, there is a sophisticated mechanism controlled by the human nervous system.